Hey, this is Gary Hughes with the Photobomb Podcast. Thank you for tuning in to another video on the Photobomb Podcast YouTube channel. I'm going to show you another cool, quick tip that I use all the time in retouching faces. I shoot a lot of headshots in my business, so facial retouching is a big part of what I do. And one of the big persistent problems that you have with facial retouching is dark circles, bags, and discoloration under the eyes. Now, this is one of the main things I see photographers do really poorly, especially when they're starting out. So I want to show you one of the ways that I have learned to deal with this using a tool called the history brush. And so we're going to start out by selecting our patch tool. Now, our patch tool is a really cool little tool right over here. If you use the spot healing brush or the red eye tool, any of that stuff, the patch tool is right over there that you can get to it by hitting the J key on your keyboard if you like to use those keyboard shortcuts. So zooming right into what we're doing, you can see that when you look at an eye, and the eye is an orb and it sits on the eyelid, and so one of the things that people do is they tend to make it look flat like a porcelain doll and ends up looking fake. And I found that my clients now, as digital editing and manipulation has come further and further, I find that my clients and the people that I shoot for tend to really like to look great, but they don't want to look fake. And so here's a cool tip. Take this patch tool, which is good for removing texture. I use it a lot for removing blemishes too, and you can see, for example, if you go to something like this little pock mark on the nose here, if you grab that, surround it with the patch tool, and then you're going to drag it to another part of the face that has a similar texture and similar depth of field. For example, if you were to drag it a little bit down the nose, you're going to find you're going to be pretty close to what you have up there, and let it go. And then you'll get rid of that pockmark pretty easily. Now, one of the things that you don't want to do is take it to an area that's not similar, like over here, and then you'll end up getting the texture from that zone. It will maintain roughly the color and blend it as best it can automatically, but you want to keep it similar texture, similar depth of field. If you were to take it to an area that was less in focus, then you'd end up having kind of a blurry area there. So that's a cool way to use that patch tool, and we'll just grab that right there, and that blends in nicely. So use this same tool and grab the area under the eye that you want to eliminate, just like this. You don't have to be super precise, just go all the way around it, and even sometimes get in a little bit of the eyelashes there, no problem. And then I'll usually drag it right down underneath itself into this area that's going to be kind of the texture and the depth of field and the same kind of color tone that you want. So drag that down a little bit there, bam, and let it go, and then the computer will do the work. And you can see that now we've gotten rid of sort of the dark area, but we've also made the eye very flat. So a lot of photographers would say, oh, well, that looks better, and it certainly seems to be an improvement. But we're talking about good, better, best, and we want to up our game a little bit here. So we're going to start by going over to the other eye and doing the same thing first. I'm going to grab that area, surround it, bring it down, boom, and we're just going to use that patch tool to blend in these edges. As you can see, they don't always blend perfectly, so we're just going to move stuff around a little bit to make that a little smoother. And now we've got both eyes that are looking a lot better, but we've lost the roundness, we've lost the dimension of the eye sitting in the eyelid there. So I want to grab this tool right here, the history brush. Now you can get to it by selecting Y on your keyboard as a keyboard shortcut for it. And what it does is it enables you to paint back through the history state. Like every time that you take an action, every time you click on something, if you look at it in history, it records it right over here. Now there are some options with the history state, the history palette over here. You can make it hold more or less in the memory. I usually use whatever the default is because most of my stuff isn't that in depth. But if you look right here, this is when you open the image, this is the original history state. You'll see this little icon right next to it, and that's the history brush. Now you can take the history brush and you can set it to any layer, which is at any point that you've been editing, and put it back any of those history states right here, which is kind of cool. Most of the time I end up leaving it right there on that original history state. And because I don't usually have to do a ton when I'm doing facial retouching, but if it stays there, it ends up being a pretty cool thing. Now keep in mind, if you do a color adjustment or you do something severe in the interim, you're not going to want to paint back past that history state. So make sure that you go and select to the last place that you want to paint to. And usually this is one of the first things I do when I retouch, so I usually just leave it in the default position. Now if you take that history brush and you have it on a normal blend mode. Opacity, I usually work between 20 and 30%. And go back to this area that we've retouched by using the patch tool, and you're just going to kind of brush it underneath a little bit with a soft brush. I've got a really soft brush, in this case about 70 or 80 pixels, depends on the size of your image. And you're just going to brush a little bit back there, and then we're going to go to the other side and we're going to do the same exact thing. And now what we've got is we've got dimension back in the eye. It's actually sitting there in the socket. It has weight and roundness to it. So we've enabled ourselves to eliminate the darkness and the discoloration without ruining the image by making it look flat and fake. So let's take a look at what that looks like. We'll zoom out and then we'll go back to the original. So there's the original. That's our bags and our darkness, and then this is the finished one right here. So we've still got roundness in the eye, but we've eliminated the darkness and the dark circles. So there is a really cool tip using the history brush that you can use in your everyday work. Now there are multiple ways to get the same thing done in Photoshop, and we'll make more videos showing more ways to deal with the same problem, I'm sure. But for now, that's all I got for you. Check us out online, photobombpodcast.com, and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you can find your podcasts. Also, make sure that you subscribe to the YouTube channel, because we'll be putting videos up here every week that'll be useful for any photographers, anything from dealing with raw processing, retouching, and all kinds of stuff that we do every single day. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.